flight simulator all started for me right here, with SubLogic's Flight Simulator II for the Commodore 64. Although I played simulation games in the past, such as Star Raiders for the Atari 5200 and Solo Flight for the Commodore 64, it was this game right here that would get me into flight simulation through my teenage years and long into adulthood. SubLogic Flight Simulator II by the one and only Bruce Artwick. Put yourself in the pilot seat of a Piper 181 Cherokee Archer and head for the skies. You'll get high-speed color 3D graphics and a spectacular panoramic view as you practice takeoffs, landings, and aerobatics. There are over 80 airports and 4 scenery areas to include Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles, and New York. There's user-variable weather from clear blue skies to a gray overcast, and even wind direction, speed, and shear. You can also set the time and season. All of your basic navigational aids are here to include VOR, ILS, ADF, and DME. And once you've flown around for a bit, you can jump into the seat of a biplane and play as a World War I ace in a fun aerial battle game. You may have noticed that I said you would be flying in a Piper Cherokee Archer and not a Cessna. Although Microsoft Flight Simulators 1 and 2 were with a Cessna, the Commodore 64 was a Piper. I always assumed it was a Cessna until I read the manual. It explains why the control panel on SubLogic's Flight Simulator 2 differs from the one on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2. Inside the box, you've got the 5¼ floppy disk, which is actually floppy, in the true sense of floppiness. You get 2 maps of the city on each side for all of your navigational needs and sense of adventure. An advertisement for SubLogic Night Mission Pinball, something you can play after a long night of flying. You also get an operation manual, which tells you all that you need to know about how operational your aircraft is and how to operate it. It also gives you instructions on how to navigate from VOR to VOR, NDBs, ILS, patterns, and much more. I learned a lot about flying just from this one book, and the skills followed me into later simulators. You also get this flight physics and aircraft control manual, which teaches you all about the physics of aircraft, how they fly, all the science, jargon, and how to perform aerobatics. You also get this handy-duty reference card, which helps you be able to reference all the keyboard controls that need referencing so that you know what keys to push to fly your aircraft. There's no installation with this game. You just stick the floppy disk into the Commodore 1541 disk drive and away you go. Unless you've got the cassette version, in which you might be waiting for a bit. After the game boots up, you're given a choice of display. Do you want to use a color TV or a composite monitor, or would you rather play in black and white? The choice is yours. And then you get another choice of demo mode or regular flight mode. You can use the demo mode as a screensaver, or just jump right into the game and start flying. Once loaded, you are greeted with this familiar and classic view of runway 36 of the beloved Meigs Field Airport in Chicago. Rest in peace. No need to waste time, so let's get flying. Ah yes, this takes me back to the simple days of flight simulation. Although you had simple VFR scenery such as roads and rivers to use as reference, you really needed to depend on your instruments for navigation and determining how high above the ground you were. There's no GPS, no ground proximity warning system, and no ATC to guide you. There's also no air traffic. It's just you, your plane, and the open sky. Although flying from airport to airport is not difficult with basic VOR navigational skills, getting lined up at the runway and landing safely is quite a different story. There are also very few ILS runways in the game. You can use your navigational aids to get you in the ballpark of lining up, but you'll really want to closely watch those jagged lines as they get nearer so that you can line up. It's not easy, but you'll get it with practice. You can also use the top-down view to help, and that's about as close to a Garmin GPS moving map as you're gonna get. Landing on the runway takes practice as well, and many times you'll probably land just outside of the runway. Just do your best not to stall as you're about to land, because this simulator is not forgiving with it at all. The settings menu is where you can set the settings of all your flight simulation challenges, such as the season, time, cloud layers, wind layers, and the reliability of your plane. Oh, that reliability. It's a fun challenge when something breaks, but setting it at 99% seems to be like setting it at 50%. It's fun at first, but gets annoying after a while, especially when your fuel leaks out or your engine overheats. Your maps have north and east coordinates of all the airports available, and you can enter these into the menu to get yourself to the airport you'd like to depart from. It's also the only way you'll get to the other areas in the United States: Seattle, Los Angeles, and New York. You also have the option of slew mode if you'd like to move yourself to a parking space at the airport before departing. Night flying can definitely be an IFR experience because you won't see much of anything. Although major airports will be easy to spot with their blue taxi lights and white outlined runways, you'll only see the center line of the runway at smaller airports. Dusk and Dawn are also in the game in a very simplistic form, and both look the same, probably because they are both four-letter words that begin with D. You've got a comm radio where you can tune in the major airports for ATIS messages, and you have a transponder, which has no actual use in the game. You can change the digits, but that's all you can do with it. You've also got carb heat, which becomes important when you're flying in the winter. For navigation, you've got two nav radios, with nav 1 having the DME, assuming the VOR itself has one. You also have an ADF, but you'll need to go into the setting options to turn it on. This is also where you can change Flight Simulator over to the World War I Ace game. You'll start off in friendly territory, but once you cross over the enemy border, it's time to get serious with your flying. I played this game every now and then when I was a teenager in the 80s, but my real love was the actual Flight Simulator itself. I've always loved flying, and this was an amazing game back in 1984. Being able to fly from one location to another, landing at an airport with fueling facilities to top off the tanks and repair any malfunctions, plus flying across the country were very appealing to me. Although you can't fly across country with just the base game, you could with the addition of the SubLogic Scenery Disks. Although 12 discs were planned for the United States, only 9 were released for the Commodore 64 in addition to Hawaii, Japan, Western Europe, and a more detailed area, San Francisco, for VFR flying. Back in the day, I had the awesome SubLogic Western United States set, which came with a blue binder with room to add the other scenery discs at the back. This blue binder is a very rare find. If you're a collector and manage to find one, don't waste any time picking it up, and then let me know about it. Flight Simulator II for the Commodore 64 is where I learned all of my navigation and flying skills. Things got easier with the later versions of Flight Simulator, yet complex in other areas. You can pick this up on the internet for relatively cheap to add to your collection, but playing it is probably best with a Commodore 64 emulators such as CCS64, which I use, or C64 Forever by Cloanto. If you're looking for a bit of retro flying back when flight simulation was in its infancy, then you can't go wrong with SubLogic Flight Simulator 2. And if you like this review, then I do have other Flight Simulator related reviews, as well as a World Tour series featuring Flight Simulator 2 for the C64. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and join me on live streams over on Twitch. If you'd like to support me and help the channel grow, there's also Patreon. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you around. Be safe in the skies and have a